Welcome to the Art of Marketing Operations, a Taylor podcast. Here you can grow your knowledge about marketing operations, listen to ideas and strategies to help you scale, grow, and optimize your efficiency, drive your speed to market, and enrich your work life. Let's get to it.
Welcome to the Art of Marketing Operations, a Taylor podcast. I'm Glenn Bottomley, and today my guest is Kenji Jovig, founder and managing director at Bayfield Company, a national e-commerce and digital consulting firm. Thanks for joining us today, Kenji.
Hey, thanks, Glenn. Good to see you. Great to talk to you.
Likewise. Well, now, Kenji, you work with e-commerce companies, and I know that you help them develop brick-and-mortar stores. And so interesting, this is sort of the reverse from the past, when brick-and-mortar stores were building online stores for the first time. So what is the main challenge that you've seen with companies making either of these types of transitions?
Yeah, it's so interesting because it's sort of going both directions now, right? So brick and mortar was obviously the first channel. And so brands were initially focusing on building expertise for brick and mortar channel. And it was kind of this term of OTIF, on time in full. Make sure you ship the retailer everything they're asking for on time and full. So getting products on the physical shelf was the most important thing. However, over time, as e-commerce grew, it became more about marketing, such as getting improved search results, having great content for conversion. It's a very different skill set that brands need because it's not just about replenishment, and it's really more about marketing and getting customers' attention. So you have to be good at something new. Brands are now kind of going in the opposite direction because startup e-commerce brands typically can grow fairly quickly. It's super easy to get a Shopify store up and running. I think I got my first dropship store on Shopify up in like a weekend. It's very easy to get up on Amazon as well. Amazon has a lot of services such as fulfillment to make it easier to be successful in e-commerce. As digital native brands grow, they need to expand into brick and mortar, which is a dramatically different environment and requires a buyer to make hard choices to put products on a shelf in a space-constrained environment. So there are lots of challenges.
Mm-hmm. And for the company that is the digital first, and then they're now starting to go into brick and mortar, what are some of the challenges that you can think that they're going to face that they probably don't, are not necessarily thinking about because they've started in that digital space? What's going to be some of the challenges they're going to face as they start to move there?
Yeah, to be good at both e-commerce and brick and mortar requires brands to be good at many things, as I mentioned. So it's not just replenishment anymore, it's also marketing. So for example, it's really important for brands to be successful at digital marketing. For example, to be successful even in a traditional brick and mortar environment, increasingly it's important to be engaged with retail media. So for example, Walmart Connect, Target Roundel, Kroger Precision Marketing, Albertsons Media Collective and such. Customers are therefore engaged digitally, but then the fulfillment may happen at store and they may go to pick it up at the store environment. So brands really have to be effective at not just the brick and mortar environment, not just the e-commerce environment, but be able to be successful across both channels.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that it's really both now, that it's online stores, it's brick and mortar stores, et cetera. For a brand with limited resources, limited employees, there's got to be a matter of focus. So how do you help a brand sort of deal with balancing them both, right? There has to be sort of the sweet spot of, you have to maintain that digital presence. You want to grow over here on the brick and mortar side. But you've got to have this balance. And with limited resources, how do you sort of recommend they hit that right balance?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I do think brands have to start someplace. So you've got to find your entry point into the market. And that could be brick and mortar and you just focus on getting into stores. It could be starting e-commerce only, whatever it is. And so I think when you're truly in a resource constrained environment, you really have to pick and choose and be choiceful. Being successful is not just about what you do, but it's also about being successful at saying no and what you don't do. As you grow, though, I think it requires a different skill set. And so it requires you to be more of an athlete, to be more generalized, as opposed to I'm really only good at one thing, just producing a product and then getting it to stores. You have to be really good at other functions such as marketing. So I think that over time, brands really have to develop kind of a more broad skill set across many disciplines.
Yeah, it's an interesting point where it's, you might start as a specialist, but, now you have that second channel and it's more important to now be more of a generalist at that point. And
I
one
mean,
of the areas that I know that, yeah, go
sorry,
ahead.
here's one example of that. I mean, if you think of like D2C only brands like Harry's and Dollar Shave Club from back in the day, they were really successful at building a D2C only, not just e-commerce, but their own website. They were not offered in other channels or other platforms whatsoever. But they hit some limit to growth, and in order to grow, then they eventually had to go elsewhere. So you now see them in brick and mortar stores like Walmart, also on Amazon. So even those brands who kind of started in one place and grew really successfully and did one thing really well, now they have to be more broad. And you've seen them be acquired by big brands as well, and so they've really had to develop a broad skill set.
I have seen them in Target, to your point, on those brands specifically. And I think Gillette didn't Gillette buy, was it the Dollar Shave Club?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Interesting. But one of the things that I know that you've mentioned about that I know that you're very, very passionate about, and is this idea of using content in the most efficient way, both online, but as well as offline as well. So can you first talk to me a little bit about where does that passion for content come from? And then what are the benefits in sort of choosing and then utilizing just really compelling content?
Yeah, I love creating content. Over the last year, I've kind of played around in different formats. I've spent a lot of time on YouTube creating several different channels. I've got channels with 200,000 subscribers, tens of millions of views. It's a lot of fun to create content, engage with people in different ways. I even wrote a book with the help of ChatGPT. I created a content website, and so I was trying to sort of create this three-legged stool, right? So I've got YouTube, a Kindle published book, and a content website, all in the same niche. And so that way it kind of feeds itself, right? So I can drive YouTube viewers by talking about, if they're watching a YouTube video, I can mention my content site, so they go to the content site to get more information. From the content site, they can find some other YouTube videos. They can also go to Amazon to buy the book, for example. So I'm trying to sort of play around with lots of different formats of content. In this day and age, content is absolutely king, and the space is changing so rapidly. I mean, consider how fast TikTok exploded, especially during the pandemic, where people were stuck at home looking for different ways to kind of deal with for entertainment, endlessly scrolling and consuming wide ranges of content, right? Short form video, or even like long form, like Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast gets like 200 million views every single video he drops. And he basically becomes his own influencer. So it's not just social media marketing, but now it's influencer marketing. So he uses those views on YouTube by sending people into physical stores to buy Feastables, which is his brand of food and snacks. So you get TikTokers and YouTubers like Mr. Beast. They weren't affected by the Hollywood writer strike that just happened because they're self-contained content creators. They're not dependent on a pre-existing industry. They can either do their own content creation in-house on a small scale, or like Mr. Beast, he has his own production company in-house. Of course, using AI to generate content is, well documented. It's a little bit controversial, but there's no question that AI is already and will continue to massively disrupt the innovation in this industry of kind of content creation. So there's a lot of things that are going on that are exciting.
Well, when you talk about product packaging, I know when we chatted before, you mentioned how important physical product packaging is when telling a product story and ultimately reinforcing a brand's promise. So can you share a little bit more about how you arrived at that assessment, and what recommendations would you have for a marketing operations executive who is responsible for creating and or leveraging product packaging today for their brand?
Yeah, for sure. So it's so interesting because product packaging in e-commerce should be very different than in brick and mortar. So for example, in e-commerce, a customer doesn't really care what box it shows up to the house in. They've already made their purchase the day before, for example. And so all the content they needed to make their decision, they've already seen on the website or on YouTube or someplace like that. So in brick and mortar, it's very different because the point of purchase happens at the exact same time of fulfillment. You're actually taking it home at that time. So when you're walking through a store, you really need to be able to see, touch, and feel the product. You need to know what is in the box. So you may have to turn it around to see, what are the contents of the box? What are the ingredients in this food that I'm considering? Or, is there this device or that accessory in the packaging, or do I need to buy something else? So being able to see and touch and feel the box in a physical brick and mortar environment is very different than in e-commerce. I've noticed how different it can be. So for example, I bought a toy on Amazon a few weeks ago for a birthday party for my son. And what was interesting is the frustration-free packaging, basically the brown corrugated box that was, had no graphics or anything like that, was obviously very different than the retail-ready packaging, which, if that was sitting on a store shelf, you could kind of touch it or, activate the siren and that sort of thing. And so they offered both options. So buying on Amazon, you could either buy the frustration-free packaging and receive it in a brown corrugated box, or you could buy the retail-ready packaging and it would be packaged in an outer corrugate box that would go to your home. And there was a significant price difference. I mean, it was like $8 difference between the two. So it was easy for me in e-commerce to just buy the frustration free because it was cheaper and I already knew what I was getting. So it's just very different how brands need to tell their story from a packaging perspective in e-commerce versus brick and mortar.
That's fascinating. And is there advice that you have for, say, an online brand where the buyer just simply doesn't have the ability to physically touch a product's packaging? I mean, obviously we've seen, multiple photography, there's videos, there's client-generated or consumer-generated package or video content, 3D or rotating of imagery. What other advice can you give to that type of a brand?
Yeah, exactly. All those things, that's exactly what brands need to be thinking about. So, for example, at the basic level, imagery in a carousel is really important to make sure that the customer can see different views, zooming in on ingredients or nutrition statements, for example, and having, all the copy in terms of bullets and features and things of that nature. All those are really important. To your point, videos. So having a video of how to set up the product or how to, kind of a quick overview on how to use it, what the instructions are, that sort of thing. I've seen furniture or other devices on Amazon where it comes with a PDF that you can download that has a spare instruction manual. So if you lose what you get in the box, then you can just go back to the website and download the instructions. A 360-degree spin, because in a store you can pick up a box and rotate it to see different angles, and so you can do the same thing in e-commerce. And you can look at the jungle gym, for example, that you're buying, so you can see, if my kid can enter it in this side, that'll work there. So kind of rotating the views is really important as well. Of course, user-generated content. That's critically important for social proof. So being able to see what the star rating is, so you can see, how do customers rate the product, and also reviews. So if I see a good star rating, sometimes I also just look at the reviews, and I look at the 1-star reviews. So what are the things that people are saying about it? And in some cases, it is, after, when I first got the product, it was great. So I would have rated it 5 stars on day 1, but after I used it for 2 weeks, it broke, and so now it's a 1-star. So I look at the 5 stars, and it's like, I bought this yesterday and I love it. I bought this 2 days ago and I love it. Well, maybe it's people love it out of the box, but then it fails really quickly. So getting some additional fidelity about how the product performs over its life cycle, that can be important. Things like content marketing. So, YouTube and TikTok, influencer marketing. And these are things that can happen at various levels of the funnel. You can have upper funnel awareness, kind of get brand awareness from influencers. You can either have kind of lower funnel conversion activities on TikTok, for example. Either way, you need to find some way to get your message across to customers in the channels that they're engaging.
I want to touch on both those. Those are really, really great summarization and kind of overviews. Regarding sort of consumer reviews, so obviously consumer reviews is one of a really great way to understand from other people what is the value of this product and the satisfaction of that product. But how should a brand look at a consumer review to help to continue to drive trust and brand loyalty long term? Is it the volume of those consumer reviews? Is it the consistency of it? Like, what, from your perspective, how should a brand utilize consumer reviews to build trust and drive loyalty?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of all of the above. So, for example, when looking at reviews, I think the quantity of reviews is important. For example, there's data that if you have only 20 reviews or fewer, then customers assume that the brand just got their friends and family to provide reviews, and so they're not legitimate reviews. You need to have as many reviews as possible. Oftentimes, I'm buying products on Amazon where there are tens of thousands of reviews, so clearly customers are engaged enough to submit a review. It's also the star rating. When I travel, for example, and I buy food on DoorDash or Grubhub, the ratings of a restaurant are really important if it's a brand I'm not familiar with. And so good luck getting my business if they're not well above 4 stars in terms of their review. Same thing in e-commerce. If I'm searching for a generic product and the brand is not important, then I'm a little bit indifferent about the brand, and all I care about is having the best product. And so if there are similar products offered by different manufacturers, then the tiebreaker ends up being the reviews and the ratings. So rarely do I ever buy anything if the rating itself is less than 4.3 stars. And again, hundreds of reviews at least. I admit I'm a kind of a sucker for social proof. I want to hear what other customers have said about a product, because the brand itself is going to say their marketing message and they're going to tell their story. And so sometimes I don't always trust that. So I want to hear what other people have to say at volume and at scale in order to make my own determination as to whether or not it's the right product for me.
Very, very effective. I love that. And now let's go to the social media piece, because you talked about TikTok and other social media platforms. So what advice can you give to a brand in terms of how they should leverage social media content, whether they're either fully online or only brick and mortar or both?
No matter what, brands need to be super, super active on social media. If you're an upstart brand, maybe all you need to do is focus on sort of upper funnel marketing awareness. So that way, the next time a customer is in store, then they're going to see your new brand right next to a legacy brand, and they'll have higher consideration for you. In other cases, social media might lead to a direct conversion, and the funnel is shaped very differently. It's not just upper funnel going to lower funnel. You can actually have in one channel the conversion from awareness all the way to conversion. For example, my 14-year-old daughter buys more beauty products on TikTok Shop than on Amazon, and TikTok Shop is basically brand new. TikTok Shop also has so many different ways to engage from a shopping perspective. There's live shopping, which is something that is kind of new and growing here in the US. There's shoppable videos and the shop itself. So brands who are active on social media are really going to be successful. Brands who avoid social media, they're going to get devoured by the digitally native brands over time. That's a fact, and you can take that one to the bank.
Brilliant insights there, Kenji. Before we wrap up today's episode, though, what is the main takeaway that you want to share to help understand the challenges facing marketing operations executives today?
Yeah, I appreciate that. My biggest point is that content is king. And it's very complicated because content is so varied and broad, and it can be hard to create content. For example, the physical packaging is really important for a brick and mortar environment. It's completely irrelevant in e-commerce, as we've talked about. It can also be about the, a social media video. If you remember on TikTok, there's this video of some guy who's just skating on a longboard, drinking, cran raspberry juice while he's singing Fleetwood Mac. His car had just broken down. It was like a 23-second video that got like 100 million hits just overnight. I mean, so imagine the free awareness that Ocean Spray got for that. I don't know if Ocean Spray actually, did anything to engage with that, but the free press that they were getting from some random person who wasn't trying to make a name for himself. He just was putting out a fun video of himself doing something different. So there's so many different ways to engage. Again, we've talked about images and videos and really driving user-generated content and ratings and reviews. So brands are going to be really active in creating all kinds of social content and influencer content. Those are the brands that are going to be successful. If you avoid it at your own risk.
Valuable perspectives. Well, that wraps up this episode of The Art of Marketing Operations. Thank you so much for joining us today, Kenji.
Thanks, Glenn, for having me. I really appreciate your time. It was really fun. Appreciate it.
Well, until next time, stay safe and take care.
Thank you for listening to The Art of Marketing Operations, brought to you by Taylor. Don't forget to hit subscribe in your favorite podcast player. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, and share. Until next time.